And nothing burns yet. Great. So we're going to export the different assets that we need for this sketch here. And we need a couple of different things here. We already have, if you haven't imported it, but we should already have this HMD in hand transparent PNG file. That's one of the ones we will need. But besides that, we'll just double click here in the gray area again, so we can begin to import some more. I'll just quickly find your assets folder here. So the one we will need now is located in here, inside the 2D video and image assets. And we'll need both this HMD transparent, the museum, HMD pop-up. We'll also need this one called, not the one called website, but this Kadi Ponde Art Museum thingy here. So let's press import to these. So now we should have the museum footage, and you can see this is basically just footage without anything. So what we want to do here is that we want to start out by having sort of it show that we put the glasses on, and then we will fade into this HMD environment here. So the first thing we're going to do is that we're going to just drag this HMD in hand transparent. We're going to use this again. So we're just going to drag this down into maybe video layer 2 so we can put in a background maybe. So just drag this down into our timeline. So now you can see now I have this one placed here. And maybe I just want to continue. We can at least see what happens if I continue the background from before into the scene. So I'm going to add that. You can see here the background is transparent on this image. So if you have made a transparent background in Photoshop or whatever video image editing software, it will recognize that inside Premiere too. So the neat thing here is that we can sort of just use the same background. It will probably work well enough. Or if we wanted to change the perspective, we could do as we did before. We could just cut this little piece of the background out by using the razor tool, and then select our new, zoom in a bit, smaller component here to say, okay, let's make it look at least like it's in a different place in the classroom, something like this maybe. Maybe scale it a bit. So we say, okay, it's still the same context, but it's clearly making sort of this scene shift here. Something like this. And maybe this pop-up one, maybe that one from before, maybe I'll delete that. So instead of having now, we have this scene shift, and it should look something like this. Okay? So now we're going to play with the animation again, but now we're going to not use it to sort of make this popping effect. Now we will say basically that at this point in time, where the video starts, so find the exact moment that it cuts, like here, we will toggle the animation for both the positioning and the scaling of this. Because in the beginning we wanted to make sure that at least the hands should be sort of out in the side so we don't get this cut. And again, I could have just redrawn the entire picture having longer hands, but we would spend time doing stuff that have nothing to do with sketching. This is actually better. So maybe have it just start here, where it just fits outside of it. And then I think we should move a bit along the timeline here, second or so, and maybe scale up our glasses a bit, but maybe also either change the coordinates or just dragging it by clicking motion. If you click motion up here, you can drag it. So something okay, it also has to move up a bit. You can see the blue arrow here indicates sort of the motion path that we're beginning to create now. So we're saying, okay, it becomes a bit larger now. So now we have something like, whoop. So again, So this was the first 2 pair of keyframes. So the next pair, we can do the same procedure, make it a bit larger, move it a bit more up, and maybe have him actually reposition it in a bit so it's like something like at the next spot here, I dragged it to the right. At the next spot, I might be dragging it a bit more to the left again, so we have sort of this fittingly motion. And maybe I'd zoom it a bit more. So something like that. And over here, zoomed even more. And maybe more or less being up here. And then in the end here, having it all the way up and zoomed more or less so we now have the eyes in focus here. So you can see now we've drawn this motion path of it changing scale and changing movement, and we now get sort of this animation. And you can see at some points it goes faster and slower. And if I'm unhappy with what I've done here with the motion path, the great thing is that I can drag the keyframes up here. And if I drag the keyframes closer to each other or farther away from each other, I will adjust the timing of the animation. So now the animation will look different. Now it goes slower in the end, like that. So when you have done the keyframes, you can begin to adjust it. And there are more fine-tuned adjustments you can do by right-clicking on them. You can make what you call a Bezier curve, where you sort of make it go slowly in, slowly out, so it seems more natural and stuff like that. But again, it's a bit out of the sketching scope. That's only if we have to make it look really nice. And we don't right now. So if we can agree, this conveys the idea that now I have my headset up here, and what I might need then is to sort of fade over to our next scene. So this sort of becomes a brook. Okay, now he has glasses on. The way we'll do that is by dragging the Cardimonde Art Museum, and we'll drag that video, that entire video, down in Video Layer 1. So that will be our new background, basically. So from here, then we'll suddenly shift here. So what we want is that up in Video Layer 2 now, we want to place our HEMD, our sort of placeholder for a headset. And you can't see it right now because transparency in Adobe Premiere is black. But if I drag this one down here, you can see now we have the overlay. Something like that. And of course right now it doesn't fit. I could just right click and choose scale to frame size, or you can always just select the clip and just change the scaling to your own liking, so it fits like you would want it to be. So now we have something that goes on like this. And this becomes a bit abrupt. So this is where it actually makes a lot of sense that we use a real video transition. And maybe you have found some of the transitions down in your sketching folder, or besides that, there is just this entire folder filled with different kinds of transitions. We mostly use this one called Dissolve Effects. Here we have this one called Dip to Black. So we will have sort of, when the headset comes up, it will just be like my eyes closing and then opening again into another scene. So if I drag this one on the transition between these two, you can see now we get this, something like that. Okay. And of course we need to extend this for as long as we want the headset to be on. So something like that. Now we have a person walking around with a headset on, and he explores this entire space. And now my idea was that, okay, he has to find 4 paintings of a specific painter. So I also made this museum pop-up with just a made-up word for what I think could be a fitting name for this specific painting. Also because I figured that the painter Simirati Dicci, whatever, I could find a description on Wikipedia of one of his paintings. So this suddenly became the Simirati hunt. So what we do now is that we want to portray, okay, we need to have this one pop up when he sort of finds this image. And multiple things could do that. We could do it either by showing, okay, we could add an HTC Vive controller and show, okay, it's when you point towards the screen that it will pop up. Or we could do it like having sort of a fixed crosshair in the middle and then having that sort of begin to animate when you have a hotspot, and then, okay, when you stand still in front of the image, it will just pop up. So if we run with the first idea, I can show you how we can use the titles for that. Now, some of you may remember that you can go up here in File, press New, press this one called Legacy Title. That's when we get an editor for making both text but also rudimentary graphics like squares and stuff. If I jump into that one, just press OK, just gets the title now. I go up here in File and New, and under New there's this one called Legacy Title. And as soon as you have pressed it, it automatically generates it over here in the assets. So right now I have one called Title. Here I can draw, of course, some text if I want to, but I can also down here draw some rudimentary shapes. So I might just draw a quick sort of improvised crosshair to the best of my limited draw boxes skills. So we might make something that looks a little like And if they are a bit off, you can just use the selector tool or simply just try to position it. So I have something like this. And if I'm unhappy with the color of it, I can just select it and tweak the hell out of it over here, saying maybe I want it to be a reddish color, like that. Something like that. Or you can just make it a dot. It could be a square, it could be a circle, whatever. Now we do it as sort of a pointer from a shooting game. When we're done doing that, we can just press exit the editor, and then our title will be over here, and of course we can rename it Crosshair if we want. And for this one, we will have that sort of be placed on top of it all. So I'll place it up here on top on video layer 3, extend it towards the entirety of our clip.
How do you make sure it's in the...
I'll show you. When we place it, it actually doesn't matter where it is, because when we place it down here, we can just go up in Effects Control, and we can just reposition it where we want it to be, and resize it also. Sorry? Yeah, I usually do. You could, of course, sometimes it could be beneficial to import a grid map with transparency, so you import a coordinate system and then you have that as sort of your baseline if you want it to be precise. But again, we're not aiming for precision, we're aiming for sketching fast, not perfect. But when we put it in here, we can begin to say, okay, how large should it actually be during our sketch? Should it be like something like this? Maybe a bit smaller, actually. Something like that, maybe. And then having that as sort of, this is where it is whenever our user is walking around. And maybe as soon as the user begins to have a focus over here on the image, and then we might, my idea for the interaction might be, okay, then the interface here should tell me, this is a hotspot, this is something that is interesting for me. So we just do more or less the same as we've been doing before now. We animate toggle the scaling here to say at this point it should be regularly sized, but already here it should maybe a few seconds later, or not even seconds, it should have blown up to this size. And then it should have gone all the way down again. And then all the way up again. And all the way. You can see that you can of course, you can zoom in here as well. So you get a bit more space. Same way, there is these handles down here. So we can zoom in and let's make it a bit smaller again. And then see how the timing of this goes. How does this work? It might actually go a bit faster. So again, we can just drag the keyframes closer to each other here. So now we get kind of this weep, 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 and maybe up until where we want him to sort of stop. Maybe maybe around here or so. So what I might do is I just select all the keyframes and again hold down the Alt button and then sort of have them be placed here. So we just replicate that this continues to be like this up until he finds the right moment, and that should be here. And then here we actually want the pop-up to show up. So I'm thinking that this pop-up should replace the crosshair. So we'll drag that up on top of the crosshair. Of course, we could also just delete the crosshair in this moment, but I think it might be beneficial that we just drag the, and you can see here when I drag the Museum HMD pop-up and I drag it up here, it automatically generates a new layer for us. So now I have a video layer 4 suddenly. So we say at this moment it should boing, pop up, and we can just reposition this a bit like that. And the thing is, if I have this here right now, you'll probably see that it follows along quite nicely, but it's actually not for that long a period that our user is actually looking at this. So around here, it might be beneficial that we actually use this frame hold that we did before to sort of make it freeze in time. So here we will once again go down to our museum walkthrough video, because this is the one, it's the background that we want to freeze. So I can go down here, and if we zoom in a bit, I can make just a little bit of this, and I can just extend the rest of it over here, and then I can try to make a frame hold again, you know, by right-clicking, frame hold, and then we just use these sequence time code to be sure that it will work. And then we can extend this scene. Now you can see instead of having this being for a short amount of time, we can sort of drag this back here. So now I have a freeze frame. So when he comes over here, he will walk, it will begin to pop, and he will fix on it, and pop. And then he stops up for a moment, he reads the sign. It doesn't look beautiful, but we sort of get the idea. And then later on he will, maybe as soon as he removes himself from the painting, we want this one to go away. So as soon as he actually gets his crosshair back. And we can adjust this if we want. So now the idea is, As long as this one is inside his field of view, it's there, and when he removes his field of view, it just disappears. Yep.
Can you pause the music as well with this frame pop or something?
Yeah, you can of course pause the music, but I actually would argue for, you can see here when you right click the footage, you can click the unlink, and when you unlink, you can select the audio track and the video track independently. So what I would actually argue for, especially since this is a sketch, is either to just remove the music completely and replace it with something else, or in this specific element where we framed holded it, just unlink, delete this specific piece of music, and then just, since we're not going to use the entire footage of this, just take the audio track from the other one and drag it over here. So we sort of have the music continuing to play, and then we'll just cut it over here because this is all that we need. We will stop the video probably around here or so. So actually the rest of it isn't really necessary for us. But it's a good question. Sometimes it makes sense to use the video audio that is on whatever we have either recorded or got from someone else, and other times we will go into the Free Music archive and find stuff for ourselves. But right now this comes rather abrupt, right? It's a little too poof. So here we can use this, we have this cross dissolve. That's a rather nice effect. And if we drag this on top of the HCMD, you can see now it sort of fades in instead. So it's sort of wing. That might work for us to convey the idea, okay, it's something that pops up when you overlay. There might be other ways to do it. And then when he begins to move, we need to make the same sort of thing, that as soon as he leaves around here, we want it to disappear again. So again, we can just take a cross dissolve in the end of the clip too, and then have something like this. And now you can see that dissolve is actually too slow, or takes too long time. So it already begins to fade away here, where we wanted it to first fade away here. Then actually, if you zoom in on the timeline, you can actually also double click on the little dissolve, the transition effect here. You can come to a point where you can double click it, and then you can say, instead of taking an entire second, we want it only to be maybe 1/5 of that. So down to 1/5 of a second. So it becomes shorter. That wasn't enough. 1/10. That's better. So 1/10 of a second, and we get something like, so more or less timed with when the cursor moves out of the picture frame, our pop-up disappears. And then comes the important part. Right now, skilled students and designers might say, okay, I get the idea, but I also might want to use sound here. And of course, we could play some sound by ourselves, or we could position the sounds that I unfortunately didn't get to you guys, but I played this one for you before the break, so I'll just show you what it effectively will do. Right now we just have the, so no sound really to convey this. And even though I might not want this magic sound in the final app I'm gonna make, for sketching purposes, it might be good to do something like this. Just to show, whoa, something happened. So something along the lines of this. Okay. And you can see, if we actually had done this before, and if this was not new to us, this was probably have taken about 5-10 minutes to just quickly mark up for us and say, okay, from putting on the headset to walking around with the headset on, what would I see from a first-person simulated view here? What would actually happen? how would I, and this is also in an environment where I have some kind of things to control. How do I control this? That might be the next question. Am I holding a gamepad or something? But okay, we know that, okay, I can activate stuff by viewing when the viewer becomes stuff like that. And then one of you might say to me, but what about if he needed a controller? What if it was a controller instead? Then we could actually just say, okay, let's try it out. I'll skip this a bit. I'll go through this a bit fast because we'll show this first person view in the next demo also. But we could actually just say, behind this HDMI transparent layer, behind this, but in the middle ground, so it's still in front of the museum, what if we placed some footage of a hand? So I could select my entire timeline up until this point, move this up a piece here, up, move it up. So now we have 5 layers of video running, and now I have a free one here and down here. And then I could import, because in our assets folder we have a lot of footage of me trying to look very computer animated, holding a Vive controller with a glove on, so you can see that it's a human hand and not a graphical hand or something, moving around this controller. And I could maybe take this shot 5 here. I could import it, place it down here, and same way as we did before with the Ultra key, I can put this on my green screen footage, go up to Effects Control, select my key and color, and remove the background. And then I can just sort of figure out, okay, how would I want to position this? Should it be in the middle? Should it maybe be rotated a bit? How would I like this to look? And now we actually have me running around with actually video footage of me, and you can see it's still behind the scope here, so we get the idea that I'm doing stuff. But you can also see now the Corsair begins to look a bit weird, because that should probably actually follow the motion of my hand, right? So it might actually work okay, but we could also now need to, and we won't go through this, but if you really wanted to convey how would a Corsair plus a controller look, we should probably actually begin to also set the position for our Corsair, saying, okay, at this point in time where the video starts, Corsair's up here, and then we actually would need to move around here, moving in just so slightly. And you can see it becomes time consuming, because then I would need to do like that, do like that, and all the way over there. And you can see there it might be beneficial to have been a bit less moving than I was. Maybe just hold your hand still and just making the clicking effect, right? Because you will have to spend some time. But again, this might actually be okay, because now we begin to explore what would it look like if I actually had to sort of have a cursor moving around like that. How would that actually, and now we didn't animate anymore, but that might as well work. It might actually be something worthwhile exploring, right? Okay. Could this be this technique? Can you see yourself use this for some of you? I think this is one most of you will, in some way or the other, be able to use. You could also just have a still image, essentially, of some data visualization in the background here, and then add, as we did here, this might be the overlay graphics here. That might as well. Oh, wait a moment. So actually, we need to put this one. You see here, actually that needed to be behind, behind this one, like that. So, just shifted up, now we had a 6th layer, oh no, still 5, but now we just have this one in the background. So you can shift around, remember to video layer 1, background, and then up in foreground. But if I wanted to visualize IMDb data, for an example, then I might have some data visualizations I made statically, and I might just put them in as an overlay here and put some animated effects on top of it and begin to see how would this actually look. So in the same way, as soon as we can work in layers, as soon as we can animate it, and as soon as we can tweak these animations, we can do a lot by just doing this alone.